Hello and welcome to another episode of Put Me in Coach podcast, episode 12. And let's just get into this game of game two Diamondbacks against the Mets. So put me in coach because I am in the spot of being the coach. Our lineup, we have Kento Marte as the DH. And so Vargas is playing second base. Jose Fernandez is playing first. Tim Tawa at left field. And Jorge Barosa in center field. And the rest is just the same. So, obviously for offense, a lot of base hits. This is possibility enough the most I have seen. This offense is getting hits and stuff. Of course, enough. The most biggest one is Corbin Carroll going 3 for 5. Pretty much good, a really good game today and stuff. And then even Vargas went 3 for 4 and stuff. So that's pretty good as well. Who knows enough if he would go, 4 for 5 if he had an extra bat and stuff. But fortunately he didn't and stuff. But I really like the offense. They attacked in the beginning and also at the end as well and stuff to get some runs and stuff. So honestly enough, I really like the offense, what they're doing. So in this way, it's enough of, if you can hack against the opponents, doesn't matter what time of the game, beginning, the middle, or the end, doesn't matter and stuff. If you can get on base hits and stuff, and also getting runs at when people are on base and stuff, getting some RBIs, hits and stuff, this is how you win games. Like, to be honest enough. So if this is going to look good on paper and stuff, you're mostly going to win games and stuff. And also enough of it depends enough of what the the opponent team are doing as well and stuff. I would definitely say the Mets did, I say, okay today. They didn't really give a lot of base hits here and there and stuff. But I would definitely say Diamondbacks offense did more better than the Mets today, and generally enough. So it's just another, positive thing. Obviously enough, Nolan Arenado went 0 for 5 and stuff, but, those things are going to happen. And he did good yesterday, so it just depends enough of what his vibe and how good he is and stuff. And just today he wasn't, and the rest did and stuff. I wouldn't say everybody got a base hit, because in generally enough of what I'm seeing, the people who did not get a base hit is Gabe Marino, Nolan Arenado, and Tim Tawa and stuff. And the rest did and stuff. Mostly one, 2 or 3. I think those are like the most biggest hits. And honestly enough, it really did change the game the best in a way, because they got on base and put some runs on and stuff. So love to see the offense be more positive, and hopefully they can keep moving forward with that. We are going into pitching wise right now and stuff. So Ryan Nelson did really good today. He went 6 innings, gave up 5 hits, struck out 5, no walks, by the way, and stuff, and gave up 1 run and stuff. So I wouldn't say probably it could be possibility his best start overall and stuff, but I would say he did pretty good today and stuff. Didn't look pretty overall and stuff, but I would definitely say it's some ways pretty, So I think he did had a good start in some ways, but I think almost at the end, he just kind of a little back and forth a little bit and stuff. And then David Peterson started for the Mets today when 5 innings, gave up 6, struck out 6, walked 2, and gave up 5 runs. So obviously enough, he didn't do so well today. I think he did okay. I think even in the beginning, that's where the runs came in for the Diamondbacks and stuff, and then he kind of got a little eased off at the end and stuff. So he ended good, trying to not going so much, so he finished on a good note on him and stuff. So I think that's huge for him. Obviously, what I've heard on TV when I was watching the game, on the Diamondbacks announcers, just hearing of his last time when David Peterson was pitching, it was against the Giants, and obviously enough, it was kind of like a deja vu on David Peterson, where enough of the Giants possibility got some runs off of Peterson pretty early in the game or between, depends of how much pitching Peterson did in the game and stuff. So I would say Peterson is a really good pitcher and stuff. It's just today was just not his day. So fortunately, he got the loss. So that's that. And then the bullpen for pitching, we got Ryan Thompson, Andrew Hoffman, and Taylor Clark to end the game and stuff. And fortunately enough, Hoffman is the only one gave up 1 run and stuff. So I think the bullpen is doing pretty good. I'm seeing a more positive over the bullpen and stuff. Obviously, the offense is helping because we got a lot of runs against our opponents. So this is how you're gonna win games. Our offense needs to go on hot to literally get runs, and our pitching needs to not get our opponents 2 runs. And so we want to go them less runs than what we have so we can literally win the game. That's how sports is. If you're on top, you're going to win the game. And that's like all sports and stuff. So that's pretty big of that, like the bullpen and stuff, and not giving up a lot of runs, only 2 runs. Honestly enough, that's pretty good. Pretty good so far. Then we're going to go scoring and stuff. I apologize for the Mets on this and stuff. I didn't really say a lot about the Mets scoring on this and stuff. Mostly the rest were the Diamondbacks. They scored the mostly of the game and stuff. The only thing I would talk about, the Mets and stuff, Beatty hit RBI and stuff, and then somebody got Beatty to scored in around like the 8th inning and stuff to make them to get 2 runs and stuff. So they didn't really do too much, and they were just base hits, sacrifice fly and stuff, and that's pretty much it and stuff. But fortunately enough for the Diamondbacks for scoring is Gabe Moreno started with the RBI sacrifice fly, 1-0 on top of the first. Ketel Marte with the RBI single to make it 2-0 on top of the second. Corbin Carroll get 2 RBIs double, make it 4-0 on top of the second, and Geraldo Perdomo with the RBI sacrifice fly to make it 5-0 top in the second, with 4 runs in the second inning and stuff. So pretty crazy top of the second for the Diamondbacks and stuff. So I'm telling you enough of the offense. We're cooking in second in the top of the second and stuff. And then Jorge Barroza hit a 2 RBI double to make it as 7-1 top of the 8th. And stuff. And this was also a crazy play as well, where mostly enough Luis Roberto Jr. and center field for the Mets should absolutely catch the ball. Mostly he would absolutely catch that ball, but fortunately it just went out with his glove, and Barossa got a double, 2 RBI for the Diamondbacks and stuff. So fortunately it didn't really go, Roberto way and stuff, but those are the things you need to do and stuff. You cannot make errors, and if there's people on base as well, they're going to score. So that just happens and stuff. So that's pretty much of that for scoring. The total score is 7-2. The Diamondbacks won. They are now 6-6 out of the record. They're back to 500. And let's talk about the progress. So I wouldn't say a lot about progress. I would absolutely say I would love to see this more often. Please, Diamondbacks. Like, come on. Like, this is honestly ridiculous. We don't want to be hot and cold. We want to be hot every single time. I understand of enough of who's up, on the mound and like team and whatever and stuff. You cannot think about this so much enough of it. You cannot just say enough of like, oh, we say enough of like in for example, what I meant trying to say and stuff like say like about like Randy Johnson up to the plate for the Diamondbacks and stuff, like you would think of enough of the Diamondbacks are going to get like an easy win because we have a ace pitcher on the mound and stuff. He throws gas and stuff. Randy Johnson's one of the best pitchers in MLB in the Hall of Fame. Pitch a perfect game in 2004 and stuff. And huge for the Diamondbacks in 2001 World Series. So, like, I understand enough of he is honestly enough. Like, you expect of Randy Johnson is going to win games every single time he's going to start the game and stuff. And that's like other like really great, like if you're talking about like the 90s and the 2000s starting pitcher like Pedro Martinez, Greg Maddux, like all those pitchers like and stuff are absolutely great and stuff. Like if you think about of enough for like now I'm thinking about like Greg Maddux in a way with the Braves and stuff. They have 3 Hall of Fame pitchers on that team besides of I already said Greg Maddux, that's one of them and stuff. The other is John Smoltz and Tom Glavine and stuff, and all 3 of them are great, obviously Hall of Fame and then stuff. The Braves in the 90s, they only been in the World Series 5 times, and they only won once of that and stuff. And that was in 1995, beating the Cleveland Indians and stuff. And the other time, they lost against the Twins in 1991. They also lost the Blue Jays back-to-back in 1992. And stuff. That was the time the Blue Jays were hot and winning back-to-back World Series in 1992 and 1993. And 93 they beat the Phillies and stuff. So, and then they lost 1996 against the Yankees. Obviously, the Yankees were pretty popular at that time with Captain Cheater at the time and stuff. And then they also got swept in 1999 against the Yankees and stuff. Obviously the Yankees won 3 in a row in that prior time in 1998, sweeping the Padres and then beating the Mets in 2000 and stuff. And they could absolutely beat the Diamondbacks in 2001, but fortunately that just didn't happen and stuff. They could win 4 in a row, but they just ended up to being 3 in a row and stuff. So you would think about of a team like the Braves, like with Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, like really great Hall of Fame, like talented pitchers and players on the Atlanta Braves and stuff, went to 5 World Series in the 90s and only won once. So you got to understand of how good, it's hard enough to get to the World Series, and stuff. And then enough of not having your pitchers to do good and stuff. So if you want to talk about like 1999 Braves versus Yankees and stuff, I don't know what really happened and stuff. I just know the Yankees swept the Braves and stuff. Honestly enough, the Yankees were a really good team with a very high talented team. Like if you really think about it, I thinking, like Bernie Williams and Derek Jeter was probably the most huge, baseball players on that team and stuff, and actually beating three of high pitchers on their team and stuff, you would expect enough of they should fight a little bit more and stuff, and fortunately they got swept. Like I would talk about like the 2012 World Series when the Detroit Tigers got swept by the San Francisco Giants and stuff, and the crazy thing about that is the Tigers team in 2012 was absolutely insane. But you got to also think about the Giants as well. They were pretty good of enough to sweep a really good team in a World Series. So you cannot expect enough of a team is going to win the World Series, big wise, like of with talented pitchers, talented players on that specifically team and stuff. Like I watch a video of Jolly Oliver, part of the Jumbo Media Group and stuff, made a video about of the best starting rotation in 2005. And that was the Houston Astros, and they went to the World Series in 2005, and they got swept by the Chicago White Sox. So, and the three pitchers they had a really great rotation starting and stuff. They had what's his name? Roger Clemens, I'm gonna say. I almost forgot his name. And stuff, because it's weird enough of with Roger Clemens at this time, because, obviously he was at his old age and stuff. He was about to retire at this time, and then he kind of like came back in a way just to be with the Astros at like a very last moment and stuff. And then obviously he had a his one of his teammate, he was with the Yankees. That was Andy Pettiette. I know I'm probably saying the last name wrong, but you understand what I'm talking about. So both of them were on that team, and both of those pitchers are really great and stuff. And then the other pitcher on that team was Roy Oswalt and stuff. Honestly enough, like on paper of enough, like this three pitcher rotation was probably the most biggest rotation gross pitchers in 2005, and they got swept in the World Series against the White Sox and cannot get a ring. Like, so you like, to me of enough in this way, like it doesn't make no sense. If you are against of the best and the best, you should absolutely go to game 7 in the World Series, and then who wins in that game is champion and stuff, So it's crazy enough to think enough of the best team is going to get swept in a World Series, and they're not the favorites. Like, say the winner of the World Series are not the favorites to win the World Series, but they won the World Series anyways, and sweeping a really good team should win the World Series. So, sometimes enough, it doesn't make sense, but here's the thing about baseball. Things happened, So, you gotta understand of enough of let's don't think about who is at the mound or who is at the plate if you're the pitcher as well and stuff. If you're the batter and you're on the Diamondbacks, who gives a F about who's the pitcher? Okay, if it's Paul Skeens, it's Paul Skeens. If it's somebody else like really good, like Terrace Kubal, we did great on Terrace Kubal. You know, we only gave 1 run of Terrace Kubal at that game and stuff, and we still got the win. You know, so you gotta understand of enough of who cares about who's the pitcher. You want to fight to win the game. So to fight to win the game is to do your best and try and find the focus of getting base hits and stuff. And if you can get base hits and even more base hits and stuff, you're going to progress more and more and stuff. And hopefully enough for this game, they see more opportunity to play in this typical way and stuff. Like, obviously, yeah, David Peterson was the pitcher today and stuff. And obviously enough, you know, David Peterson is a really good pitcher for the Mets. There shouldn't be no reason enough of he would be bad and being part of the rotation for the Mets and stuff. Obviously, he has great stuff for this team, for the Mets and stuff. So I wouldn't say he is the best pitcher on this team because obviously Freddie Peralta is the ace for the Mets and stuff. So you're not going to really expect enough of having David Peterson to do good every single game. He's going to be hot and cold. The only way enough of if David Peterson is going to do good, he got to show of he's going to do good and stuff. And fortunately enough, today he just didn't have that game, and the Diamondbacks offense were just hitting off of him and stuff. So hopefully enough, we can see that more and stuff. And again, I am a little afraid enough of, you know, more talented big pitchers are gonna do good and stuff. And hopefully enough to absolutely, you know, damage the Diamondbacks and stuff. But we want to do the opposite way, where enough of we want to do the damage on the pitcher and stuff. And then same thing with the pitcher, where enough of who cares who's at the mound, at the plate, I meant to say, and stuff. Say enough of, like, you know, Mike Trout or, you know, big names and stuff, you know, like Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, like all of those and stuff. Like, there's times enough of these players are going to strike out. Yes, they're going to be more successful because they're more talented, they're more best players, and say Bobby Wood Jr. in that situation and stuff. Like, these guys are going to hit base hits and home runs. Just a matter of fact if the pitcher is going to do good on these batters and stuff. So we want to understand enough of, like, who cares who's at the bat. My job is going to strike or get the player out so we can get out of the inning, get our offense on good offense so we can get some base hits and run, and our pitchers needs to not get the batters too on base and on runs and stuff. So that's what I would say to progress of enough of who cares who's at the mound, who's at the plate. Let's do our best work and stuff. And if you work hard to do all these things enough to get on base hits, striking players out and stuff, you're going to be more successful to win games in this way and stuff. And fortunately enough, it worked today. So that's what I would say enough progress of this, where enough of, okay, we did good on against of a really good team like the Mets, and obviously enough to literally tie the series right now with 1-1 and stuff. And if we win today, we beat the series over them and stuff. So we would like to win tomorrow and stuff. And tomorrow is going to be a very interesting game as well. But I just hopefully enough of the Diamondbacks see a good opportunity to hack again. And I'm not just saying about tomorrow. Hack it more, because like we want to see this progress every single game. And I know it's early and stuff, but I just like to see my boys to do more well than going high than low and stuff. So that's, yeah, I would definitely just generally enough to say that at that point and stuff. I know I went a little off with like the World Series and stuff, but you gotta understand enough of, I'm trying to put a point of like, of if you respect enough of a really good pitcher or a batter is gonna do good and stuff. Just depends enough of who is gonna do good and who's gonna go bad. So that's where enough of the Diamondbacks just need to focus on that. Where enough of just like, my goal is to strike out this batter. And if you're the batter on the Diamondbacks, my goal is to hit a base hit or get some runs off of this pitcher. And it's always in that way and stuff. And I hopefully enough the Diamondbacks will do that more, in the future in this series. I mean, this season and stuff, because we want more wins than we want and stuff. So we don't want to lose. We want to win. I know they're back to 500, and we cannot stay, hot and cold. Lose a game, win a game, lose again. We want to win all games where we can. So that is that. And then our MVP for today is going to be Corbin Carroll. He did the most today and stuff. And also, this would be his second MVP for me and stuff in this episode and stuff. Or this podcast, I meant to say. And also, this is Corbin Carroll 500 games. So congrats for Corbin Carroll for that. I think that's huge for him and stuff. That's where enough of just like every single game matters of enough of every single time you're going to play, it counts. So it's crazy enough to think about that. Enough 500, you think about it, like he hasn't really played that long, but now I really think about it, he came in 2022 in the middle of the season and went hot on his MVP. Well, I didn't say MVP. I'm sorry. Rookie of the Year in 2023, and that was even the year the Diamondbacks went to the World Series, and he could win MVP, but fortunately he didn't. But and then also he was an all-star and stuff. So good for Carroll and stuff. Good for the Diamondbacks to win the game today. I was excited. I loved seeing the offense going hard and stuff. So hopefully we can see that progress for the next game tomorrow and stuff. We're kind of having the World Baseball Classic rematch against the Mets and the Diamondbacks, where enough of with the Venezuela versus USA type of situation, where Eduardo Rodriguez is starting pitching for the Diamondbacks, and I forgot his name. The pitcher for the Mets. It's supposed to be what is his name? Like I supposed to know it and stuff. I even talk about him with my other videos and stuff. Noah McLean. I had to think about that. So sorry, I had to think about that and stuff. And he was also, he was the starting pitcher for the final for Team USA and stuff. So he's starting tomorrow as well against Rodriguez. So yeah, that's why people were saying like it could be like a World Baseball Classic final rematch situation and stuff. So I guess like our team is like Venezuela, but if you really think about it, we probably has more of DR players on the Diamondbacks more often and stuff, I would think, because like Marte, Perdomo, and then there's also Santana as well and stuff. Diamondbacks have a really very Hispanic team and stuff. A lot of people speak Spanish for the Diamondbacks and stuff, and this is pretty much huge for it. You know, obviously enough of Alec Thomas played for the Mexico team in World Baseball Classic, but just in generally enough of him being Mexico and stuff, and the other people from like Venezuela and DR and Puerto Rico and stuff. So it's interesting to think about that and stuff. So hopefully we win tomorrow. I'm excited for that game and stuff, so we can beat the series over the Mets. So hopefully you guys see another episode of Put Me in Coach tomorrow and stuff. Hope you guys like this video. See you later. Have a nice day, and thank you for watching.